One night I slept in the living room. It was completely dark and just me awake, everyone else in their rooms. I heard a creak as if someone sat in the far corner where the coffee table was. This corner was the far side of the living room where no one can access unless they walked over me. OFC, I had the bright idea to see if it's a paranormal thing. I thought to myself, clap if you're here, and heard the most crisp one clap noise in the same corner of the room. Bruh. I ran so fast to turn lights on. Don't think I've ever slept in the dark since. I've posted this before, but I was laying in bed when I heard a rustle. I looked around and lay back down. I heard a louder rustle. I looked around, looked under the bed and lay back down with my heart in my throat. Something large landed on my face and chest. It was the stupid poster above my bed. To this day I'm proud that I didn't soil myself. Not me, but my friend that stayed at my house years ago claimed she heard someone run up the outdoor stairs, knock on the door. Then run down and run up the indoor stairs and knock on the door. Several times. It would be impossible to run up both sets of stairs in such a short time frame, but she claimed it happened and refused to sleep at my house again. Woke up from my bed going side to side, creaking. The door banging on the wall repeatedly. My parents coming into my room yelling, telling me to get out of the house. There was an earthquake going on, a very very big one. What made it 10x worse was that we used to live on the top floor of an apartment complex back then, and it happened twice within a matter of 2 days. Right after that, we ended up moving to a house. During the process of moving, I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking there was an earthquake going on. I still have PTSD from it and can't comfortably sit on chairs that rock back and forth. I woke up after getting tapped on my shoulder blade. I kept still and a couple minutes later it happened again. I turned around to see what it was, super scared, and this time it tapped my face. I realized there was a lime green alien flying around my room. I screamed the loudest I've ever screamed, and everyone in the household came in to see me screaming at a half-deflated birthday balloon that was going around in circles upside down from the ceiling fan. Didn't help that we love watching the science fiction movies and shows. I woke up to sound of scampering raccoon-like creature inside my room zooming about the night before Christmas. It then bounced on my bed, jumped off and ran out. Raccoon-sized. I followed it and it was laying on the couch and barked at me adorably. Apparently my parents got my sister a puppy and it had escaped during the night because it was lonely. They had it in an uncovered puppy kennel in the living room and he climbed out. The interesting thing is he didn't like my older sister and instead clung to me, and he became my dog when she moved out and couldn't take him. Best friend to this day. I was a police officer, sorry about that. Australian, NSW, and country service. This is from the 1990s. A body had been located in the hills with a bunch of stab wounds. A young bloke. It turned out to be a bizarre self-mutilation suicide rather than a murder. But I didn't know that originally. The body was outside a small fibro hippie shack and it was in dense bushland. Because of the isolation, the body was left in situ with an overnight guard, me, and the forensic team and detectives would attend early the next morning. It was only a delay of 4 to 5 hours to get sunlight and an undisturbed daylight crime scene. So I was left there for the night by myself in a vehicle, Toyota Land Cruiser. I'm not one to spook easily, so I set the car up in the driveway and made myself comfortable, passenger seat all the way back, door open and feet through the open window of the front door. And soon enough I went to sleep. And I dreamt the murderer was coming through the bush to come back and get me as well. I snapped awake. After a few deep breaths I could still hear the murderer coming through the lantana. Scratching and snapping twigs. I near shit myself. I scrabbled around and grabbed my gun belt, I'd taken it off, and torch and got ready for whatever was about to happen. I took a couple of steps and shone the torch into the lantana only to see a sizable wallaby who was just as surprised as I was. He fucked off up the driveway and I sat there shaking until the sun came up. Oh boy, do I have a story. My sister and I slept in the same room when we lived in our grandparents' house. We both always fought over the top bunk bed that was pushed up against the wall, not too far from the bedroom door. But looking back, it did seem like a massive room. Well, the door was shut tight that night while the toys scattered all over the floor due to how lazy my sister and I were as kids. Always being yelled at to clean up our room. We had one window that we kept covered because I love the dark, and I still sleep in the dark to this day, and because we snuck out the window twice in our young lives that the window ended up getting bolted shut. Well, my sister had a night light after this event. It had to be around 2 close to 3 in the morning. I had the bottom bunk while my sister had the top. She won the battle between who got the top bunk. And our family settled it with one to get the top one week while the other had got it the other week. All 4 of them were annoyed by our constant fighting over the top bunk. I was in somewhat of a deep sleep while she whispered my name over and over. Me being a light sleeper, I woke up grouchy asking what she wanted. The tone in her voice made me pull my covers over my head as she asked me, "Do you see that in the corner?" I said no. And she begins freaking out as she describes to me that a tall dark figure wearing a hat stood in the corner. Now she's creeping me the fuck out. I ask her what it's doing. And with that, I regretted asking. It's just making noises and standing there. Now I pulled my covers over my head fully as she began freaking out even more. It began walking towards her. And with that, she lost it. Yelling for our father as she screamed and cried out. The bedroom door opened as the light to the living room showed nothing but toys and the bunk bed. I took a peek to see what was going on. Only to see my sister climbing down the bunk bed really quickly and out the door, ignoring the fact that she ran all over Legos and dolls that her and I left on the floor. Her crying out in the living room while my father shut the door, leaving me all alone in the dark. My father left me all alone in the dark with a figure in the corner that I couldn't see. Before we moved, she requested the bottom of the bunk for now on. Not sure whether it was 2 a.m., but it definitely was late at night/early morning. I was 6 and my parents and I were staying at my grandma's house, all of us sleeping in one large bedroom. It was an old house built where lots of people met their end during World War II. Since we went to stay there, I would get poked and prodded during the night. I was sharing a bed with my brother, and every time I woke up and looked over at him, he was dead asleep. It kept happening, only late at night. I could feel a finger pressing into my flesh and yet no one else was awake. I would be confused and just go back to sleep. Until one night, I was sleeping on my back, and when I woke up from a poke, I opened my eyes to a figure floating above me and a large round angry face just above mine. It suddenly said SHHHHH and I freaked out. I screamed, jumped out of bed and woke up my dad. I spent the rest of the night in bed with my parents, and had nightmares all night. The poking stopped after that and I never got another visit in all the time I visited over the years, but I always felt watched when I went upstairs. I used to hate using the bathroom at night. I still remember that face, it'll never leave me. So, my sister and I have bedrooms that are connected through a hallway, and when we were younger, some nights a week, Mom would share the bed with my sister and Dad would sleep with me in my bed. This was because we both regularly had problems sleeping and would otherwise disturb them in their bedroom, which was on the other side of the house. One night, I woke up to the sound of my sister singing la 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 super loudly. Since I had just woken up, I kept my eyes shut and laid there still trying to sleep despite her singing. Then, I heard my mom wake up and tell her to be quiet. There's silence for a couple minutes before she abruptly starts singing again. This time, in my frustration, I yelled out, "Shut up." This was followed by silence for a couple minutes before the singing starts again. At this point, I sat up in bed ready to march across the hallway to my sister's room and tell her to stop singing, but upon sitting up in bed I realized my sister was asleep right next to me. I was so confused I went to check her room anyway, and I found my parents sound asleep. To this day I can't explain what happened. I knew I was awake each time I heard the singing because it was what woke me up and kept me awake. Several years ago my boyfriend and I found ourselves house sitting for a friend who had all electric appliances. We needed a place to stay and they needed someone to watch their halfway renovated house. One night the battery reminder on the smoke detector beeped. Just beeped. I must have been in very deep sleep having some sort of nightmare and digesting that sound as an alarm, because the next thing I know my boyfriend is shaking me awake looking absolutely petrified. I guess I was screaming in my sleep. But when he woke me up, I went straight into a panic attack because I pushed him away and started yelling, saying to him that we needed to get out of the house. We need to get out of the house. But in my state, I was also convinced there was someone outside the house waiting for us. It was very confusing, and the beep was still happening intermittently. I remember crouching against the wall in tears. My poor boyfriend was freaking out and trying to calm me down and assure me we were safe. That the noise was just the battery in the smoke detector, but it still took several minutes for it to register with me and for me to calm down. We were both shook by my reaction, and I never slept well in the house after that. I've been woken up by gunfire, cops banging on my door, actual fire alarms, but that damned beep just found its way in my sleeping brain. Even now, if our smoke detector beeps, I get a quick surge of anxiety.